All right, let's take a little moment to investigate some midpoints and see what the midpoint formula looks like on the coordinate plane. So if we have a couple points here, we got 0, 4, and 0, 10. So 0, 4 is here, and 0, 10 is up here. And the question is, what's the midpoint? So if this is 0, 10, and this is 0, 4, where's the point that's exactly halfway? Well, it turns out that that is, with the little counting, we can see those are 6 apart. So we see 0, 7. 0, 7 would be the midpoint. That sounds good. So 0, 7. What about these two? What if the midpoints are, we got a point 8, 2 and 6, 2? Where's the midpoint for 8, 2 and 6, 2? Well, 8, 2 is over here. 6, 2 is right here. All right, here's a tough one. Where's the midpoint? Well, right in the middle, obviously, is 7, 2, right? So that's in the middle of 8, 2 and 6, 2. So these first couple examples, we can see that we're just looking for a coordinate that's in between. 7 is right in between 10 and 4. And here, 7 is between 6 and 8. What do we call a number that is exactly in the middle of two numbers? Well, that's an average. So an average, if we take 8 and 6 and we average it, we get 7. If we take 4 and 10 and we average it, we get 7. So what if we have some points like this? And we want to find the midpoint. Well, the midpoint is going to be an average. What's exactly in between -1 and -4? Well, an average, remember, you've done averages before, right? So we're going to add and divide by 2. And so this is going to be -5 halves. And if we average the -5 and -9, let's see, we get -5 plus -9. Add them and divide by 2. And that's going to be -14 divided by 2, which is -7. All right, so let's see if this works. This is giving us an x, and this is giving us a y, because we're averaging the x's and average the y's. And so that's telling me that -5 halves, or 2.5, and -7 should be the midpoint. Well, let's test that out. Let's go over here to the graph. Let's graph -1, -5, should be right there. And -4, -9, that should be down here. And then to get a line here, let's do a line, let's see. And, oh, that was close. Let me try that again. Okay, so there's a line. So halfway between here, well, notice we're going up 4 and over 3. So if I wanted to go halfway, I'd go up half as far and over half as far. And there's that point right there. And that's -2.5, because we're going left 2.5, right? And -2.5, and what we're down? -7. So there's our midpoint. The midpoint right in the middle of that red line, kind of got a lot going on now, is -2.5, -7. So it turns out that the midpoint is simply the average. So the key here is that the midpoint is an average. Midpoints is the average coordinates, all right? And so if we have two generic points, x1, y1, and x2, y2, if we want to find the midpoint, well, we're going to do kind of a two-part formula here. So we're going to find the x's by averaging those. So we're going to add the x terms and divide by 2, and that will be the x-coordinate of our midpoint. The y-coordinate will be y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Okay? So the average of the x's and average of the y's. Let's try that out on a couple here. All right, so we've got 2 points here. I want to find my midpoint. So we're going to take this, I'm kind of doing two formulas at once. Let's take the x's, add them and divide by 2. And that's going to give us 15 halves. Let's take the y's, 9 and 25, and divide by 2. That's 34 divided by 2. That's 17. So our final midpoint here is going to be, the midpoint is at 15 halves. You could put it 7.5 if you really wanted to, but fractions are good. We like fractions. And 17. So there's the midpoint. Let's try another one. What if there's negatives? Well, the nice thing is that the formula, we don't need to graph it anymore, because we're going to average the x's, 7 plus negative 32. Those are our x's, over 2. What's exactly halfway between 7 and negative 32? Well, we add those, and we get negative 25 over 2. That's our x-coordinate. Our y-coordinate gives us 9 plus negative 16 all over 2. 9 plus negative 16 is negative 7 over 2. All right, so moral of the story is we can get some pretty crazy fractions here. I guess they're not that crazy, but that tells us that our midpoint is at negative 25 halves and negative 7 halves. Again, you could go decimal, but fractions are just as nice. Now, one last example here. What if we turn this around? Okay, so what if we know that we've got a midpoint at 3, 2? Now I'm going to sketch a picture. It's not going to be a perfect picture, but I've got a midpoint somewhere over here on my coordinate plane. And I've got an a value at 8, negative 4. So somewhere down here is my a value. And b is somewhere up here. So this will be b, which I'm going to put a question mark next to. Because we know that this is the midpoint. So we've got a line through here, and that's the midpoint of something. Okay? So 3, 2 is the coordinates here. A is 8, negative 4. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, let's make this b here. Let's make that just a generic xy. I don't know what it is. So we don't know what it is, but we know this. We know that this guy right here, this 3, is the average of this x and this 8. So we know that 3 is the average. What does an average mean? It means add and divide by 2. 3 is the average of x and 8. So now we got a nice equation. Let's solve this. How do we solve this equation? Well, we want to get rid of this 2. It's being divided by 2. So let's multiply by 2. So that gives us 6 equals x plus 8. And then we'll subtract 8 from both sides, and that gives us negative 2 equals x. So that's the x-coordinate of our endpoint, that b value. And now we can go find our y value. We know that this 2 here, is crossed out. We know this 2 is the average of that y and that negative 4. So let's go ahead and do that. So 2 is the average of y over here and negative 4. So if we take y plus negative 4 and divide by 2, we get 2. This 2 is the average of these two. All right, let's solve it up. Get rid of this denominator by multiplying by 2 there. And that gives us 4 equals y plus negative 4, or y minus 4. And if we add 4 to both sides, using our algebra here, 8 equals y. So the final answer is that b is at negative 2, 8. And we found our point. Okay? So I didn't quite graph it right. It would actually end up over here, all right? But that's why this is just a model. So again, the key is that the midpoint is the average, all right? So the midpoint is the average. We got our formula here. Average, this kind of two-part formula. Average the x's, that gives us the x value of the midpoint. Average the y's gives us the y value of the midpoint. There you have it. Midpoint is the average.